Hey everybody, welcome back. We are on Unit 4, the financial sector, focused on banking and the expansion of the money supply. We are in subunit 4.4. This is part 4.1 of 4.4, okay? This is our fourth video in this little subcategory. This one is focused on the money multiplier. Guys, you see, in any economics class, any macro class, AP or college, what your teacher, what your instructor, what the AP is going to want to know is, hey, what is the maximum increase that we can get in things like the money supply or bank lending or demand deposits when the things that we saw happen in part 1, 2, and 3 happened? In other words, guys, in part 1 and 2, we had Joe make a deposit. That allowed for a bank to make a loan, which allowed for another loan and another loan. And what we ultimately want to know is, well, how much can the money supply expand, right? That's like our unit right here. How much can the money supply expand from this deposit? How much can bank lending expand? How much can demand deposits expand? And for the part 3 one, where the Fed put reserves into banks, which allowed for a loan, which allowed for another loan and another loan, again, what your instructor or AP is going to want to know is how much can these change in total? Now, here are the main questions that you're going to get in regards to those two things we just talked about, either a deposit or the Fed buying reserves from the banks. Here's the questions that we generally get. Was there an immediate change in the money supply? And we'll be answering these. And then the next one is, and this max word doesn't always apply to this question, but it's either max initial change in, this blank is demand deposits, bank lending, money supply, okay, and you'll get used to this format. It might take a little bit, just stay with me, okay, so once again, this is either initial change in these, or sometimes it is best to say max initial change in these. I'll help you out as we get into it. And then this question right here, max change in, what goes in the blank again is demand deposits, bank lending, and the money supply. Now, I'm not saying that's real clear just yet, but watch me go through the example. I think it's going to make a ton more sense here in just a second. So, we're going to go back to part 1 and 2 where we had Joe make a deposit, okay? Hopefully you kind of remember how what happened is when Joe made a deposit, reserves at banks went up by $1,000, okay? Remember, the deposit was $1,000, and Joe, of course, got a checking account, right? DDJ plus $1,000. That was transaction 1. When you get done with transaction 1, you are ready to answer this question, because when it says immediate change in the money supply, it's saying from that transaction alone, did the money supply change? Answer, no, it did not. Currency in circulation went down by 1,000 because he's giving up currency in circulation. Demand deposits went up by 1,000. What is the money supply? It is currency in circulation plus demand deposits. One went down by 1,000, one went up by 1,000. The answer is no. The deposit did not change the money supply immediately. Now, moving on to our next questions. Let me first say, there is a difference between immediate and initial, okay? Immediate just means it happened instantaneously, right there. Initial is just asking for the first change in something. Here's how I like to explain it, okay? Think about a marathon, all right? And gun goes off, and say you watched the marathon, and I met up with you later after seeing the marathon, and I walk up to you and I say, who finished the marathon immediately? You would look at me very strangely and say, no one finished it immediately. But then if I said, hey, who was the initial finisher, i.e. who was the first finisher, you would then just tell me who the first finisher was. Now, that little story I'm telling you is just to make sure that we feel very clear that there's a difference between immediate and initial, okay? Immediate, we don't always have immediate something, but we're pretty much always going to have initials. What I'm trying to say is your answer is never going to be 0 for any of these. Initial, we can look downstream. We can look past T1 to find the initial, because initial just means first. Now, once again, just stick with me, all right? Remember, he made his deposit. That's what we got from the deposit. Now, Bank 1 can make a loan. Assuming that the required reserve ratio is 10%, the loan that Bank 1 can make would be $900. Sorry, keep it in this color right here. So the loan, and they're just going to loan it to somebody, Emily. You know, it doesn't really matter. Make a loan to somebody. $900 creates a demand deposit for Emily of $900. Okay? So that would be my T2. Once I get done with T2, I am ready to answer all of these questions. I hope that was easy. If it wasn't easy, watch part 1 and 2 again and watch me explain that, okay? So hopefully it's pretty easy to get T1 and T2 done. That's all you need to answer all these other questions. So, what was the initial change in demand deposits? Notice the word max doesn't come into play for this particular question. So what was the initial change in demand deposit? Well, the first change in demand deposits was the deposit of $1,000. So I'm going to put plus $1,000. Again, guys, that actually did happen immediately. Well, if something happens immediately, it also happened first, right? So if something happened immediately, it happened initially. So that deposit happened with that T1 transaction, and so DD went up by 1,000. Bank lending. Now this time I need the word max. What's the max initial change in? Why do I need the word max? Because the initial loan could have been $900 or less, okay? They don't have to lend out all of their excess reserves. The maximum that they can loan out is $900. So I need that word maximum. What was the maximum initial change in bank lending? The maximum initial change from this deposit was $900. It was $900. What is the maximum initial change in the money supply? Remember, the loan is what actually changed the money supply. That's what gave us this demand deposit, which was the first time money supply actually increased. Remember, this demand deposit was not an increase in the money supply because this demand deposit was coupled with currency in circulation going down by 1,000. This demand deposit was our first change, our initial or first change in the money supply. That was $900. All right, now how do I get these answers? Max change in demand deposits, bank lending, and money supply. Well, now I need the money multiplier. What is the money multiplier? It is 1 over the required reserve ratio. So the required reserve ratio is 10%. So the money multiplier, I'll just write it right here, equals 1 over RRR. 1 over 10%, or 1 over 0.1 is 10. In other words, 0.1 goes into 1 10 times. The money multiplier, I'm just going to write times 10 right here. Because I'm going to use this money multiplier for all of these. What's our max change in? Now in the blank, I'm putting demand deposits. Well, 1,000 times 10, 10,000. What is our max change in bank lending? Okay, so I'm just going to take my 900, that's my initial change, times 10, 9,000. 9,000. What is my max change in the money supply? Just putting the money supply in that blank. Well, my initial change was 900. 900 times 10, 9,000. All right, those are our big questions. Let me get them circled on the board. There's one. There's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. That's right, big 7 questions. Was there an immediate change? What was the max initial or just initial change in these? And what was the maximum change we can get once the whole process has completely unfolded? That's what this is. Once the whole process has completely unfolded. This is just related to the first bank, okay? This is related to the entire banking system. Now, I know it's been a long video, but let me just give you one last thing. Why max? Okay, we needed 2 things to happen to get max. Number 1, we needed every single bank to lend out all of their excess reserves. So one thing we needed to happen to get max is every single bank had to lend out all of their excess reserves. And then finally, the other way is we needed to have no currency drains. What does that mean? It means anybody that was ever paid money, remember somebody took out a loan and went and bought something. The person that received the money, they needed to go deposit that entire check in the bank and not take any currency when they made that deposit. They needed to say, hey, when I make this deposit, put it all in my demand deposit. Put it all in my checking account, i.e. no currency drains. So one last time. How do we get to max? We needed all banks to lend out all their excess reserves, and we needed no currency drains. Whew, hope you stuck with me through that whole video. We'll see you in the next one.